Okay, so I think we're live, and I see that we've already got some people here. So I hope everyone found. I realized a little late in the game that the way this was set up was not going to stream at all, and that's a problem. So I quickly created a new event, and that's why we're sort of migrated over here. So hello, Tom from California. Hey, Lori. Hey, Donna. We'll just wait. I think what I'm going to do is just wait a minute or two just to let people, because that's kind of a, curveball at the last second there. So I'll just let people kind of find us, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So please tell me, say hi if you want. Bet, hey, Bet, how you doing? Mark from Maine, how you guys doing? I'm really excited about today's topic. And I think these exercises, if it's a good chance you don't do them already, and they're like true eye openers in terms of sound production. Let me also make a little adjustment here. Hey, Alex, how you doing? Good to see you here. Okay. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, I want to make sure we obviously can see the contact point, because that's one of the main things we're going to be talking about today. All right. Roger from Sheffield, how you doing? I hope my Leeds experience. Thanks so much. Yeah, so just what Roger's talking about, if you are on my newsletter, you probably know I spent this last year, I was doing a 1-year master's program in music and well-being at the University of Leeds, which was a really great experience. So I was actually in Roger's neck of the woods for about 6 to 8 months there. Missouri, Brewster, New York. Hey, Lawrence. Hey, Denise. Okay, Don from the UK. Getting surgery tomorrow. Okay. Hi, Don. I hope you're okay. Well, I hope the surgery goes well. Hey, Chang. Barbary. Hey, how you doing? Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. So what we're talking about today is sound production. But I should say that today's live session is kind of a perfect segue for my upcoming Facebook challenge. That's going to be July 11th through 13th. So next week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 11th, 12th, and 13th on Facebook, I have a free challenge. And what we're going to be doing, it's called the Beautiful Sound Challenge. And what we do is I'm going to be kind of showing what we can do with our bow hand to unlock a truly rich and beautiful tone, but also with an organic shape, which is so important. It's kind of the way to avoid the dreaded, what people refer to as dead bow syndrome. Okay, so I'll just show you, because it's easier to demonstrate. So now if so the sound I just created, I don't think it's a bad sound. It sounds fine, but it's very flat. It's very even, which at first we think is a good thing, and then it's unchanging. And if you play pieces like that, it can sound very mechanical and robotic, even if you're really feeling the music on the inside. And what's deceptive about dead bow syndrome is that you can actually have dead bow syndrome with like a beautiful tone. So there's nothing wrong qualitatively, in my opinion, with what I just did. It just wasn't changing versus. So to me, for my ear, that what I just did the second time, suddenly it's like something came to life. And it's part of it is that organic shape, and that's what we'll be covering in that challenge. However, today, what we're going to talk about is the principles of sound production, okay? And so, just very simple outline of what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to discuss basically 3 principles with you. And then for each of them, I'm going to give you some things to think about, or some really good exercises to help you explore the principle itself, okay? And okay, I'm going to do my best here. I see all the comments, and hopefully it's going to keep updating for me. But please feel free to ask away. I'm going to, I'll be like the lizard, the chameleon with the two eyeballs. I'm going to try to keep one eyeball on the comments. And my hope is that if you have your cello and your bow with you, we can do these exercises in real time together. And if you have any questions or want any clarification, I'm here live to help you so we can really get a great handle on these exercises. Okay. All right. So let's just say, first off, why is this important? I mean, it should be there's the one obvious side of it, which is that we're talking about sound production, and adult learners, we learn the cello because we want to make a beautiful sound. That's usually our top priority, and then second is maybe some pieces, bucket list pieces we want to play, but beautiful sound is the whole thing. However, what I find about these principles I found kind of fascinating on my own journey is that typically we learn these principles really early. Even some of the principles, the first one I'll talk about, we learn day one of our journey usually, with the teacher. And that doesn't necessarily mean, however, that we know how to turn that knowledge that we now have into skill. Okay. And there's a huge chasm between I know something cerebrally and then I make that happen on the cello. Okay. And for adult learners, I think it can be tremendously frustrating to feel like you can't reliably and consistently create the tone you're expecting to hear. A lot of people end up emailing me because they're feeling stuck and frustrated and they want my advice, or they are asking about one of my courses, something like that, because they're like, I'm ready to quit. I'm on Suzuki Book 4. I hate how I sound though. So this is a really important topic to not only understand mentally, but turn it into actionable steps to improve your playing. Okay. So let's just get started right away. The first of these principles is that we bow parallel to the bridge. Okay. So what that means, parallel to the bridge, people also call it a straight bow, although, that's can feel like a misnomer, because especially, for example, on the A string, what is straight or parallel to the bridge doesn't feel straight at all. And that's part of the problem with something you say bowing parallel to the bridge. It's deceptively difficult to really get a handle on it, because when you're looking down from your point of view, the visual feedback isn't clear at first. Eventually, you kind of memorize what straight looks like, quote unquote, from your point of view, but it's not clear, especially from day one. And then there's a very common habit, which I will be covering in that how to fix this in that upcoming Facebook challenge, of kind of accidentally changing lanes. And there's we'll talk about it then, but there's reasons why that kind of happens, for player comfort reasons. But let's just talk about how do you check if you have a straight bow. I think one of the best ways, if you're at all concerned or confused, is you can just take the bow in any part of the bow. And if you're on the D string, I'll pick that because it's head on with the camera. If you just go down and you actually literally put the bow on the bridge so that it's parallel to the bridge, literally on top of the bridge, don't play. And then with your two hands, you can kind of drag the bow up without distorting the angle. So just drag it up, boom. Then you get a snapshot of what a perfectly parallel or straight bow looks like in this part of the bow. So now if we did it, let's say, for a lot of people, it's kind of like the second half of the bow where that gets a little dicey. So let's go about 7/8 the way out. I would just go ahead and put that right on the bridge, and then pull up with both arms to keep being careful not to, tilt things. And there you go. You get kind of a good snapshot. This is especially helpful on the A string, because for most people, how far out you have to go. So for me, it's my hand towards the camera on the A string to stay parallel to the bridge. I was shocked, to say the least, when I finally was getting out there and keeping a parallel bow. I had no idea that it was going to be this far away from my body. So that's just, I wouldn't call that an exercise, but it's a great kind of diagnostic tool. And then if you want to know kind of what I did to share my story, it's a kind of, I hope it inspires you, because I talk to a lot of people who also have, battle through injuries and stuff. I was having kind of an overuse injury from using my arm too much, playing cello, and having too much physical tension. This is about 5 years into my cello journey. And I was out of school for cello, but and gigging and starting my professional career, but I was like just so frustrated. So I needed to do something. What, instead of just kind of dropping everything for a few months, which felt like heartbreaking and impossible for someone as compulsive as I am, what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to limit the reps on my left hand or left arm, because that's what I have to do. And then I literally said, this is my chance to correct this like unintentional lane change that I still battle at times. And I just plonked myself in front of, either you can use your cell phone. If you have a smartphone, you can put it on a video on yourself and bow, either recorded or just watching yourself, or in front of a mirror works, like a big mirror. And I would just bow and stare at the mirror and make sure that I was holding the lane I was intentionally holding throughout. It can feel a little bit like it did at the time. I was happy to do it because it was the only thing I could do. So I was like, okay, this is lemonade out of lemons. But it might feel like really kind of eating your vegetables to do that, but it is a reliable thing. And then I'll share another very helpful way of using the bow in that Facebook challenge to help avoid that kind of unintentional lane change. When I say that, I'm just saying you'll start, we pick a note that we like, or we pick a contact point, and then pretty soon by the tip, we've just unintentionally gone way up towards the fingerboard. So we changed lanes unintentionally. And so it ends up, the problem with that is you end up with a kind of a decrescendo at the end of every down bow, instead of just kind of an even bow throughout. We'll move on to the next principle, because this is kind of like the very first principle, like kind of a basic one, and also one that it's kind of presupposed in the rest of what we're going to talk about today. But let me just say, because I remember being an adult learner early on, and I would learn something like straight, parallel to the bridge, and then I'd go on YouTube, and I see all these professional soloists doing the exact opposite. Their bows like up and down and moving and crooked and all this stuff. So just to give you a full picture, what I think you want to think is that parallel to the bridge is your default, okay? And then as you advance and you start playing pieces and you're trying to change tonal colors, or you're shifting into different left-hand positions and stuff, and trying to adjust your tone and stuff, you will break that rule on purpose. In a myriad different scenarios, you will play purposely with a crooked bow for a moment to maybe change lanes on purpose, something like that. But then your default, you should never have a bow that's wandering without you intending for it to wander in whatever direction it's going. Okay, that's what I want to say about that. Okay, so now let's talk about another principle we kind of learned early on, which is that there's 3 elements to sound production, okay? The first element is speed. The next element is weight. And the final element is contact point, okay? So let me so speed is, pretty self-explanatory. It's how fast we're moving the bow. Weight is how much weight we're sinking into the string with, okay? And I'm not pushing or pressing, but just sinking in, we'll call it that. And then the contact point is what lane you're picking, okay? Where you are, and 99.9% of the time, we're talking about somewhere between the bridge and the fingerboard, okay? And it's where the contact point is, where the hair is contacting the string, okay? And then the from here on out, we're talking about currently playing with a bow that's parallel to the bridge. So you start in a contact point and you're keeping that contact point throughout the bow stroke. That's what we're talking about right now. Okay. So you learn that really early on: speed, weight, contact point. Fantastic. Okay, but how do I like practice this and like explore it and really figure out how to turn it into part of like my playing and not just like these 3 words I memorized, 4 words. So let's experiment on a single note, and that's the first way we're going to kind of get a hold of this. So if you have your cello and bow, please get it ready now. I'm just going to type something into the chat, like a number, because sometimes if I do that, I'll see if anyone. Sometimes it updates like who's written. Okay. Okay. So we'll start. We'll start in first position, C natural, on the A string. Okay, and then so the first thing is, like I mentioned, contact point. What I like to, the way I teach it and kind of think about it a lot of times, technically, if you think about it, like kind of what is that Zeno's paradox, where you could always slice something in half, even as small as it gets. There's technically like infinite contact points, but I think for the learning purposes, it's helpful to think of kind of lanes of a highway. Okay. And the further you go, you get more and more nuanced with the gradations. Like becomes an insane superhighway of maybe 20, 30 lanes, or maybe even more. But for right now, today, we're going to talk about this as if it's a highway with 3 lanes. Okay, so you have your like middle lane we'll talk about, and then we have our kind of the fast lane, which is up high towards the fingerboard, and the slow lane of the highway, which is towards the bridge. Okay, and so what we'll find is with this experiment, we're going to just see what is required from the speed and weight elements if we pick a lane. So it's kind of a science experiment where our control is we're picking the lane, and then we're going to use our ears to try to make a beautiful sound. And then that, by doing that, we'll figure out what kind of speed and weight is needed. Okay, so please demo without vibrato at least times during an exercise. Absolutely. Okay, Donna, yeah, I will absolutely do that. Great. Thank you. So let's start with the C natural, and we'll just start in the middle lane. It's like 3 bears, you know, the mama bears, like it's kind of the middle point. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to play some bows back and forth. You can join me. And I'm just, you know, nice. It'll probably be a full bow, but I'm not being super like particular about it. I just want to get an open, beautiful sound, maybe mezzo forte, nice, rich, open sound. I'll do with and without vibrato. Okay, so just rich, resonant sound, which is a great exercise in itself, to just sit on one note and use your ear to try to open up the sound. Now, let's go to the fast lane, and we're going to, for the purpose of figuring this out, we're going to actually take the exact same weight and speed. Let's say for today's purposes, when I was in the middle, I was a 5 units of weight and 5 units of speed. Okay, so and it's going to equal 10, we'll say. So now I'm going to go up to the fast lane near the fingerboard, and I'm going to go ahead and use 5 and 5. And let's see what happens in the fast lane. Okay, so it wasn't catastrophic, but I hope through the airwaves of the internet and my microphone here, you can hear that the sound was kind of crunched, and it didn't have the same core, it didn't have the same resonance or any of that stuff. Okay, so hold on, I just see a couple comments coming in. Ways one could still practice when traveling. Okay, I'll get to that at the end. Thank you for that. And if you can, post it again at the end, because I'll try to scroll through and grab everything. Okay, so now, and I'll do it without vibrato for Donna and others. Yeah, so without vibrato, you really hear it, where it's just kind of like choked. So now, because we didn't adjust speed and weight, we're having a problem. So let's go ahead, and now we're going to change it from, instead of 5 and 5, we're going to do either 7 and 3 or 8 and 2 in favor of speed. So we're going to increase the speed and lighten up the weight. Okay? So here we go. Ready, and okay, our beautiful sound is back. All right. And what I should say for all of the exercises we're going to do today, what I want to do is establish a sound and then try to match the sound in terms of quality of sound, which is kind of the color of the sound, the timbre, how much core is in the sound, how open it is, the quality of it, and then also the volume in terms of decibels. So we're going to be trying to match sound in a whole bunch of different ways while we do these exercises, and we're trying to match our original tone. So if we were just, again, middle lane. Now if I come up, I have to really move my bow fast if I want to match the volume of my original middle lane. If I just do, and then I go, that's a nice sound, I think, for up at the fingerboard, but it's not the same volume level. So that's what's really dictating all this for me. Okay. I will be available afterwards. Yeah. Okay. So now let's go ahead. So now we have like 8 in speed, 2 in weight. And now let's take that and we'll go to the slow lane. I'm sure maybe you've done this before, but let's just have fun together. We're going to try 8 in speed, 2 in weight down at the slow lane, right by the bridge. Ready, and okay. That's probably the easiest one to realize like something's amiss, because it gets very metallic and it doesn't catch at all. So now for this slow lane, we're actually going to flip that ratio, and now we're going to do like an 8, a 7 or 8 in weight and a 3 or 2 in speed. So we're way slower with the bow, and we're going to allow more weight to be transferred into the string. I'm saying this with like a lot of passive construction, like allowing the weight to go through instead, because I don't want to say we're pushing down. It's not like you're crunching down physically with a lot of muscle. What I try to think of is, maybe this is kind of morbid, but it's a good analogy. I think it's like if you had a scalpel and you're cutting like something really thick, leather or something, we'll call it leather, and it's really thick. You have to, the scalpel's sharp, so it's not about like pushing with all your might, but you just have to be very firm with the scalpel and get the perfect edge on it to split the leather. That's what we're doing here. So now we'll go back down here. So let's do it together. We'll do, let's say an 8 in weight and a 2 in speed. Ready, and without vibrato. Okay, so now the quality will change. Like obviously, maybe not obviously, but at the fingerboard, because we're moving faster with a lighter bow and in a different part of the string, which I'll talk about in just a second, you're going to get kind of a woodier sound or like a mellow sound. I think of maybe like a flashlight with a really diffuse beam. Okay, and it's just kind of like, wow, like just a warm halo, big wide halo. The middle lane, that halo has shrunk down a little bit, but it's still kind of fuzzy on the outside. By the time you get to the bridge, we're a little closer to maybe like a laser beam. So it's very, very focused sound, which can sound a little strident to some people, especially depending on the circumstance. But that's one thing. I know we're talking a little bit without vibrato, but with vibrato, that's one of the great ways to kind of warm up a more strident sound. So now we've done that. Let's just go back and forth a couple times before we get to our next exercise. And we're going to do that kind of a little more quickly. Okay, so we'll start middle lane, and then we'll lighten up and speed up, and then we'll slow down and let a little more weight in. And we're, again, trying to match the volume and the quality as much as possible. It's not 100% possible, but we're going to do our best, okay? So middle lane, 4 bows, then up 4 bows, down 4 bows. Here we go. Ready? And... now up here, this is going to go much faster to match that volume. Ready? And... and down here towards the bridge. Ready? And... and what's funny for me, what I noticed is that once I really catch an edge and I feel like I have a really nice like tug on the string down by the bridge, it's actually the opposite with the fingerboard. I feel like I really got to move the bow to match the volume. This one down here in this slow lane, I actually have to be careful not to overdo it, because you can easily... there's my middle lane. Now with the down low, you know, if you sink in too much, you can overshoot the volume level. Okay, so this is such an excellent way to tune your ear up and really compare sounds you're making. Okay, and just to be clear, I think adult learners like to know why besides just how. If you want to know why we have to do all this, it's the differing string tension between the differing lanes. So if you just take your finger and you go press down here in like that C, where we were playing, around C. Okay, nice and cushy, hopefully for your cello. It's not too hard to get the string down. If we take the same second finger and we push down right in that kind of fingerboard area, okay, to get that all the way to the fingerboard is a lot more work, okay? But it's still relatively flexible. I mean, it's technically I'm at the end of the fingerboard, so it's a playable note. I mean, you can play past the fingerboard, but it's, it's flexible to a degree, but it's much more taut than way back in first position. Now go to the middle sounding point, that mama bear lane of the highway. Okay, that's much more taut than even the fingerboard. I can feel it. It's just more tight. And then at the bridge, it feels closer to like an immovable object than you really can't sink the string down very much. And it's just the differing string tension is going to require different things from the bow. Okay, so another way you can think of this is for the way you approach it. This is kind of like a trampoline, and like a bigger trampoline, and this fingerboard is kind of the real center of the trampoline where it's real bouncy, so you don't need a ton of weight. You can just kind of bounce. And then the further you get towards the bridge, the more you're moving towards like the edge of the trampoline near where the springs are and where it's connected. That's much more taut. And so if you really wanted to jump and catch some of that trampoline's energy, you'd have to really, sink in some weight and jump differently than if you were just in the real bouncy middle part. Okay, so string tension is what we're really battling here, or working with, rather. Let's not say battling. Let's say working with. Okay. Excellent. So now let me just, I'm going to, like I said I would, let me just see if we got any comments here. It's also louder near the bridge, Lawrence. Exactly. And so that's what I'm saying. When you get closer to the bridge, if you're doing this kind of matching exercise, that's where it's such a great exercise for your ear, because you actually have to you have to catch the string and like get a good tug going, but you can't just like let it really sink in all the way, because you'll go past the volume you were originally creating. And I should also say, this is something I like, just in my personal opinion, my experience, when we talk about something being louder or quieter, I think a lot of times we're talking about more than just the decibel level. And that's why I think this is such a great exercise, because I think if we hear a like really focused kind of high amount of core sound down by the bridge, and we hear the same volume level up at the fingerboard, we're gonna, without thinking about it, just reacting, we would think that the bridge one is louder, even if they're the same decibels, just because it's a more focused, and maybe there's more projection. You could make that argument that a more focused sound is going to project better. But let's say we're in a room close where it's like literally the same. It just hits us differently to hear a really focused, intense sound versus a louder sound that's more diffuse. So that's part of, that's my opinion. And I think that's one of the great things about this exercise, because you kind of start working with that. Just join, no problem. Why aren't the strings or fingerboard made to have the same distance apart from top to bottom? Why aren't the strings or fingerboard made to have the same distance apart from top to bottom? I don't, Tana, yeah, if you can clarify that. I don't 100% understand the question. To get wrists and fingers flexible. Okay, well, we can talk about that. Some of these questions I'll cover at the end, but a really good question, Elias. Okay, so let me. I'm just going to keep kind of plowing forward. Okay, so now you can say, great, we've kind of solved the puzzle here, because we've got our lanes, and you could have 3 lanes, you could have 5 lanes, and you would just do the same thing. However many lanes you divide this freeway up into, you're just, you kind of realizing that if you hold a contact point, you're going to have to manipulate speed and weight, but that's doable. And so you can get a beautiful sound on all these different lanes. However, the plot thickens, it's not quite so simple, because each string is kind of like its own animal. So now we're going to talk about some exercises to figure out how to kind of match sound across the strings, which for me was like a whole thing, because until I, learned a couple exercises and developed a couple for myself, I remember specifically back in the day, I felt like I had a certain string that was like my string. So there would be a period of time where I had like my D string felt amazing. And then my A string would feel like a little hoarse and a little, I feel like I'm arm wrestling it a little bit. G and C string, I have a lot of trouble, catching it, and it would skid out in the middle of the bow. And so I wasn't a big fan of those 2 strings at the time, but the D string felt great. What I realized later on was that I was basically using a perfect kind of cocktail of bow speed and bow weight to activate the D string. And then I was just applying that across the strings. And that's why it wasn't working, because each string has its own, properties. I mean, if you look down, they're all cello strings, yes, but they differ in thickness, they differ in string tension. And so they all kind of have their own, characteristics that you have to make adjustments for, even in the same lane. And that's what we're going to look at right now. Okay, so let's go ahead. And just to be clear, how, like, an image I like to use, I just want to be as helpful as possible today. When I'm talking about playing, what I'll do is I'll think about like petting animals, because I think petting, if you like lovingly pet like a dog, for example, it's a really good image for the bow, because you're like gentle at first. You don't like slap the dog's back and like, you're like, good boy. And then as you pet, you're like sinking in weight, because you're like lovingly like, good boy, that kind of thing. That's a really good analogy for how to bow, in my opinion. So what we can say is that, like, we're going to pet a Chihuahua is the A string, and then we're petting like a little terrier or a medium-sized terrier. And then this could be like a Great Dane, the G string, and then the C string could be either like a giant Mastiff or maybe like a baby hippopotamus or something. It's like much, much different, much heavier, okay? And so if you think about how you would lovingly pet a Mastiff, okay, you got to really like pet, because it's a huge dog. if you did the same kind of pet exactly to a Chihuahua, you're going to crush the poor thing. And likewise, vice versa, if you pet a Chihuahua and you're still sinking in weight and lovingly petting the dog, but if you do the same weight on a Mastiff, it's almost like tickling it. So you have to pet each animal differently, okay? So again, that's all some fun knowledge. Now, how on earth do we turn that into like an actionable exercise? What we're going to do is we're going to put the metronome on 60 in just a second here. I'll demonstrate what I'm going to do. I'm going to start on the A string. Again, we'll start C, and we're going to go second finger across the strings. So I'm going to play C, then I'm going to play F, then I'm going to play B flat, then I'm going to play E flat, all in first position across. I'm going to start on the A string and find my goal is to use the whole bow in 2 clicks. So it's click, 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 and I just want a full bow's length, and I want a beautiful sound. We'll just call it that, okay? Like mezzo forte-ish. Then I'm going to keep the exact lane I'm in, and I'm going to do the same thing on the D, G, and the C, but I'm going to make adjustments as needed to try to match the sound. Okay, so again, matching quality, matching decibel level. All right, so let's give this a shot. I'll demo. You can join me if you want, or you can just watch. Okay, so start off with our C. So. All right. So let's try it together, and then we'll talk about it just a sec. All right, here we go. So middle lane probably for 60 beats per minute. Beautiful full bow on the A, and then moving across each string. Make adjustments as needed. You're just trying to match the quality, but stay in the same lane. Here we go. Ready and. Okay, so if you did that, what you probably will find is what I found when I first was doing this is that if you really hold the same lane and you don't make a lane change, you can't use a full bow on each string. What'll happen is if you try to use a full bow on each string as you go across, you'll either skid out, the string won't catch, or to engage the string at that speed, you're going to bump up in volume. Okay, so if I can't really even catch the string at that speed in that lane at that pace. Okay, but if I did, now I'm playing fortissimo instead of like the mezzo forte that we achieved in the A string. So we're really trying to match the quality. So what I found was if I use a full bow on the A string, if I keep the lane, by the D string, I'm using probably somewhere between 3/4 of a bow and 7/8 of a bow. On the G string, it's less. It's probably between 1/2 of a bow and 3/4 of a bow. And then on the C string, it's usually about 1/2 a bow. So that's the adjustment in weight and speed that's needed just to maintain the quality that we have. Okay? So full bow on the A string, I go onto the C string, and suddenly I'm using 1/2 a bow to create the same kind of dynamic and quality. Okay? So let me just see. I see some comments coming in. Harder to press down. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's just the design of the cello is that, the string height is I see what you're saying, because Donna, what Donna's saying is, why is the finger action higher on the higher up on the fingerboard versus back in first position. The string, it gets harder and harder to push the string down. If you've played thumb position, you know this. It's more string tension. I think it's just a factor of the design, because we have a bridge, and so the angle. I don't 100% know why that's the case, because I know, for example, with guitar, the string action is it's the bridge is not curved, it's flat, and so the string action is I believe it's pretty much the same all up and down the guitar. It's part of the reason it's probably a lot less physically demanding to play guitar notes than it is to play cello notes. But yeah, I don't have an answer for why design wise that's the case. But okay. Yeah, Bet, thank you. You say you look like you're enjoying every note, no hurries, no worries. Yes, and that's really it really is what I'm trying to do here, is like my energy that I bring to this, we'll say, is kind of explorative, and like I'm trying to make a beautiful sound, which is always a fun thing to do, and then I'm trying to recreate that. So it's just part of that unhurriedness, I think, is that I'm not simply applying a weight and speed that I've already decided. That's something I did back in the day a lot that kind of would trip me up, is I wasn't 100% engaged in the sound I was making. I was more like, I'll probably use the full bow here. I'll probably do this here. I'll probably just send the bow. This is how fast I want to move the bow. But is that correct? The feedback I need for whether I'm doing something correct is the sound that's coming out. So part of the unhurried vibe maybe is just taking the time to actually really listen and compare the sound I'm making, that kind of brings you into the moment more, instead of kind of, okay, let me get through this exercise and get on to the next thing. It's like I'm really trying to match the decibel level as much as possible, which that's when it gets in that fun, like kind of Zen kind of place where you're just in the present tense, because you just need to be there to actually really listen carefully. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and change. We're going to find another solution to just show you another side of this puzzle, and how complicated this is, why the cello is like a lifelong thing. We're now going to do an exercise. We're going to take a similar exercise. We'll start with the full bow on the A string, okay, with a beautiful sound. But now there's a new rule. The new rule is I have to use a full bow on each string. So something's got to change, because we just decided together that if you want to match the quality, you can't use a full bow on each string, but now you have to. That's a new rule. So what are we going to do? I'll just give you a heads up so that the experiment goes well. We're going to change lanes purposely. Okay, so the more resistance the string is, if we want to use a full bow, we're going to have to go towards the fingerboard so that we can use more speed without being punished by the string tension, by the added difficulty of playing the string. So let me just demonstrate, and you can join me if you want. I'm at 60 again. So now I have to use a full bow on each string. I'm still trying to match quality and decibel level as usual. Ready, and okay. So let's try that together. 4 bows each. You can do vibrato or no vibrato. Either one's great. I'll do no and then no vibrato and then vibrato. Here we go. 4 bows each. Ready, and so this way, by changing lanes, we were able to use a full bow, and I still feel like we maintained it didn't sound like suddenly a new string and we have like a totally different world of sound where it's like way softer or it's way more diffuse. So that's another way of solving this. And so it really becomes a cocktail of these three elements of contact point, sound, and speed. But none of them in the real world of cello playing, none of them are absolutes. They all can be manipulated for the context. Okay, so in this case, we wanted full bows on everything, and so we couldn't just keep the contact point because that would make it unplayable, to also satisfy matching the quality and the decibel level. Okay, so it's it's a really fun kind of, I don't know, you can think of a Rubik's Cube or like something where you just can, this puzzle, it's like a three-dimensional puzzle you can solve in multiple ways. Okay, we're doing okay on time. This was longer than I expected, but I hope it's helpful. So let's go ahead now, and we'll talk about just a third principle that I think I wanted to include because it's such a source of frustration for adult learners in terms of that, like, I don't like my sound, what is going on? And that's a reminder. You probably, again, you once you learn shifting, you probably learn this early on, but it doesn't mean that it sinks in and turns into skill early on. As you move from a higher position or from a lower position on the neck, so we're saying we're in first position, to a higher position, let's just say I'm going from C to C, so an octave. Your bow, if you're going to keep the quality, which is what we're talking about today, your bow has to like commensurately move towards the bridge, and it's because of the ratio that you've created. So let's say that this looks to me like maybe like, I don't know, 8/10 of, if we broke it up into 10 units again, I'm saying when I play a C here, I'm saying that the string is now from my finger to the bridge. That's the string length. That's why back in the old, they in old manuals, they call it like stopping the string. They still do sometimes, but stopping the string means, okay, this is, A is from the nut to the bridge. When I play C, I'm saying that this is a new string I just made, and it's from my finger to the bridge. So that's the length we're dealing with. When I find a nice lane that I enjoy, I'm going to look at it and say, okay, well, if we're at 10, let's say we're at 10. Actually, now when I look in the camera, let's say that 9/10 of the distance of this new string is between my finger and the bow. And then 1/10 of it is between the bow and the bridge. Okay, so now if I go to the higher C, look how much shorter the bow got. How much shorter the string got. Now I'm saying the string starts at my third finger and goes to here. I mean, I think mathematically it's actually half the length. That's why it goes up an octave. So if I kept that same position where I had, it's going to sound very kind of squeaky and unclear. It's unsupported. Now let me go down. Suddenly we have the same sound quality. So and it's because I'm continuing that ratio of, like, say 9/10 and then 1/10 after. So why this matters so much is that I remember feeling like maybe my cello's weird or there's just something going on, because every time I play in fourth position, I sound hoarse. It just doesn't sound rich the way it sounded when I was in first position. And the reason was I wasn't making a lane change. Even between first and fourth position, there's going to be a little bit of a lane change. So let's explore together. We'll play first finger on B. Just get a little different sound in our ears. And we'll play just a nice, beautiful sound. I don't even care about full bow, anything, just beautiful tone. That's pretty nice. And then first finger on fourth position, if I do the same exact bowing, it might sound okay, but it's a little, there's a little bit of a quality difference if you can hear it. So I'm versus that matches, in my opinion, better. So instead of versus this is especially helpful if you start playing a piece where as the pitch is going higher, you need like kind of more intensity, and also if you don't want to run out of bow, because if you stay in this higher lane, that this original like first position lane, the way that you can make it sound as good as possible is by just spending more and more bow. So if I do that same slowness of bow in fourth position, it's going to make it crack. So I would instinctively, I kind of, and that can solve it to some degree, but it, you know, if you're playing a legato passage where you have to hold on to, you're playing 3 or 4 notes in a row on the same bow, you can't just spend the bow like crazy to make up for this discrepancy. Okay. Let's see. I hear this, especially on the D string, fourth position does not sound as nice, very muffled. Boris. Okay, yeah, this would be something I would say, without having seen or heard your playing, this would be something to investigate, would be making sure that you're that you come down and it's a pretty visible. Let me do it one more time and I'll actually stare at the camera. Yeah, it's a visible lane change I'm doing there. So I feel the lane change for sure, but you can actually see me move down, and I think that really helps support, especially, yeah, that's a good point, Boris, that, you know, the A string, I don't ever really much worry about it being a muffled sound. But the more I go like into even higher positions of the lower neck, like fourth position on the C string, fourth position G string, even D string a little bit, to match the quality and clarity of the A string, you need a little more effort to focus the sound. And so picking the correct lane is a huge part of that, especially as you're shifting. What's the cutoff, Rob? What's the cutoff for needing to move the bow up a lane to maintain the same quality of fifth and octave every half step? You know, that's a great question. I think I don't know that it's. I would say probably this is, you know, I've never thought of it that way. I don't if it's a half step difference, if you're going from like, I mean, basically a half step shift would be the same as if you played first finger and then playing second finger, because if you do that with 1-1, that's a half step. So a half step, you probably don't need to make a huge difference. I think the best rule of thumb is to do exercises that develop your ear, and your ear, you will get to a point where you crave that consistency of tone. And again, just to be clear, because like you'll go on YouTube and be like, this guy's all over the place. That's soft, that's loud. Yeah, that's all of that. When you hear soloists playing, that's all on purpose. So what I'm saying is, you don't want an unintentional like hoarseness or decrease in volume to come into your playing just because you shifted and you didn't make an adjustment. So just to be clear, there are times where you absolutely have like a loud noise or a loud sound, I mean, in that case, I actually came up when I went to fourth position because I went to a feather light kind of. With like a fast, like shimmery kind of thing. That's breaking the rule we're talking about, but that's for an effect versus this is all about keeping a consistency going. Just to be clear, I would say you have to use your ear, and that's the best way. Instead of thinking of a rule of like, okay, well now I've shifted from first to third, so that's going to necessitate a lane change. I think the more you get that beautiful sound in your ear, get the quality of how much core is in that sound that you like, that sounds right for the context you're in. And then you try shifting. I would experiment with shifting into second position, into third position. And then a lot of these adjustments eventually are kind of subconscious because I'm just ear guided. So if I hear you and also you'll start to feel it in your finger. You're like the string actually, what the sensation is for me is it's like the trampoline got too loose. And so I don't feel supported. I want to feel like the string pushing it up back against my first finger and giving me feedback. And I'm like tugging against something taut. If I do that, it just feels like I'm playing either on a dead string or a string that's been like the slack. There's too much slack in it, but now I feel like I'm slicing into a firm piece of cheesecake, maybe versus like one where it's way too hot, and so you like slice delicately, and it just like kind of collapses under your knife. Okay, Daniel, even though I play violin, I love watching videos. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, T translates to other string instruments. That's fantastic. I'm thrilled to hear that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our final exercise that I'll share with you to work on this. And it kind of highlights an interesting way to navigate a scenario you can navigate this discrepancy without having to change lanes. Okay, so if you remember back to 40 minutes ago or whatever it was, one of our first exercises, we took a C natural and we played it in the 3 lanes, right? And so we showed that you can play it at the fingerboard, the middle, or towards the bridge, and you can get a beautiful sound. You just have to manipulate speed and weight. That's kind of a one-way street in that the higher you go up so let's say if I go up to this high C, it's almost impossible. I will go ahead on record and say, for our purposes today, it's impossible to get a good sound at the fingerboard at this C, okay? So for that C, I have to really, again, because I moved so far up, my bow has to move commensurately towards the bridge. However, we showed earlier that in lower positions, you have a little more flexibility. You can just manage speed and weight, and you can actually play a C with a nice sound in a bunch of different lanes. Okay, so the higher you go up, the more those lanes diminish what's kind of achievable. So if we're going to do an exercise between first and fourth position, we have a couple options. If we're going to do, if I was doing it on separate bows, I could do something where I change lanes on purpose. And that's, to me, that sounds pretty good in terms of matching the quality. Another option is to figure out which note, like to prioritize one note's lane and then make an adjustment for the other note. So let me just show you what I'm going to do, and we can try it together. For this exercise, we're going to find our ideal fourth position. So I have first finger in fourth position, E natural. Now nothing crazy, just, kind of, again, rich, open, mezzo forte. Now, I'm going to be shifting from first to fourth position. So instead of picking two different lanes, I'm going to go ahead, park in the fourth position lane, and now I'm going to play the first position note in that lane, which is doable. It's just the solution we came up with earlier. I'm just going to go slower and use more weight, allow more weight in with a slower hand, okay? And then then my hand will naturally kind of speed up as I open the sound as I get to fourth position. So let me stop talking and just demo this. Okay, here we go. Ready, and... Okay, so the exercise is you're going to start on first finger and just shift to each. You go 1 1 1 1 1 2 2 1 1 3 3 1 1 4 4 1, back and forth, trying to hold that ideal fourth position lane, and then you'll be adjusting speed and weight on the fly to make the adjustment for the new hand position. So find our fourth position. Nice sound. Keep your bow there. Now we'll start in first position, and away we go. Ready, and... I think that's when this is possible, in phrasing wise, I think this is a really nice kind of solution, because I don't feel a tremendous difficulty in playing that first position note slower with a little more weight, but I get this really great benefit of not having to necessarily change lanes. So if I can manipulate speed and weight, then I can kind of hold a lane in certain scenarios and just make a difference between, I can kind of cover that need to make an adjustment with the bow. Otherwise, if you kept speed the same, for example, if I wanted to use full bows on each one, and let's say I wanted to use full bows and I wanted to use about the same, let's say it's one click on the bow, so... To match the quality in that kind of scenario, I would have to change lanes. But if you are on a slur, sometimes you can come up with this kind of solution. I think it's just a nice... It also taught me, I remember back in the day when I was first working on this, it taught me a little bit more patience, because I think I had this urge to use... I always, I just always feel like people, what's the difference between like earlier on in your journey versus more advanced is like, they're just using so much more bow. They use so much bow. And so I would kind of always start with like, use the bow. And so this taught me a nice way of being more patient and tuning in with my ear to like open up slowly and patiently and then develop the sound, instead of just having this kind of, again, what I talked about earlier is just kind of having more of an automatic approach to this, where I just like, I'm expecting I'll probably bow this much, so I'm just gonna like apply that, and then the bow would skid out, or I'd have a decrescendo. The most important note in the phrase is now the softest note, just because of where it is on the fingerboard or where it is in my bow stroke. Those kind of things would happen to me because I wasn't always patient in dividing up the bow as what fit the music. So Now, if I could just say one thing about connecting all of these exercises today, and then I'll try to get to as many questions as possible. I wanted to share these exercises because I think they really help with sound production principles. But one thing that kind of ties all of them together is that you're starting off by making a beautiful sound and then trying to match that quality and that, volume level. And I think these exercises that it's kind of a two birds with one stone, because you will get better. I think you'll improve your knowledge of the sound production principles if you haven't been doing these kind of exercises yet. But beyond that, you're also learning to listen actively while you're playing better. And that was, for me, another thing that happened while I worked on this. Was I think I just started hearing what I was actually doing versus hearing music in my head, playing the notes on a cello and expecting, like, the contour of the melody I heard in my head was not matching, sadly, was not matching what was actually coming out of the cello. But I was just listening to the radio in my head, which made me feel very confident, because I just would, like, sing like karaoke style in my head and then just play the notes. But even pitch wise was off sometimes, but so it really helps you. These exercises will help you, like, really hear in real time what's coming out of the cello, and does that fit what you want, versus it's just kind of sounds are coming out of the cello that are somewhat like what you're hearing, maybe not that much like what you're hearing. That was my experience anyway. Okay, let's see. Could be internet connection. Okay, I'm seeing people saying that like the volume is different in the room. I think one thing, I don't think volume changed when I was doing that shifting exercise. But one thing for me, volume, what you're hearing is the opening of the sound, because I opened with more bow. So it's maybe like a singer using a little more breath. Maybe the volume changes a little bit, but what it's not is. So that to me is like almost like a sforzando on the new note versus. I hear maybe volume goes up a tiny bit, but what I'm hearing is just the sound opening, because I'm using more like a singer. I'm using a little more breath when you use a little more bow speed. Okay, when you shift, do you always slide, or can you shift quickly with no sliding sound? Easy to do on a violin, but the string is much shorter. You can shift audibly or not audibly. My personal opinion is that often, especially shifting from a lower pitch to a higher pitch, I think hearing a little bit of the shift actually, in a lot of circumstances, makes it more musical sounding. The biggest way to make your shift less audible is to adjust what you're doing with the bow. Okay? If your bow doesn't move, you won't hear the shift. The problem with that is if your bow stops moving, it's very likely that you'll get kind of a re-articulation of the note, because your bow went from stopped to moving. And so you'll hear, we don't want the bow to stop completely, because unless you want to hear like a re-articulation of the sound. If you want like a legato phrase, the trick is however much sound you want to eliminate, during the shift, you're going to take weight and speed out of the bow without stopping. So you heard that slide, but I mean, that's kind of, that to me was a pretty inaudible shifting, versus that I'm hearing, I mean, I hear the pitch going down, but I think if you listen to singers, a lot of singers singing, especially like melodic pieces, you do hear like a little bit of their, if they're going up and they hit a higher note, it's not just like hitting a piano note, like ding, ding, you know, it would be ding, 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 ding. You know, there's a little bit of a, I think they sometimes call it a scoop. How much scoop you hear is up to personal taste. You know, I think the danger is having a heavy finger during your shift where you, so it's good. That sounds almost like a little bit of a trombone kind of opening up, like, or I think trombone would go this way, you know, to go higher in pitch. But so if you don't want to hear, you can just practice more and more getting, like during the shift itself, you lighten up and you slow down as much as possible. The trick though is wherever you, if you want it to be totally smooth, wherever you left the last note, you have to start the next note. So if I get quieter, I need to come in quiet because I got quiet. So that's a little too stopped for me, for my taste. I mean, maybe it depends kind of what you're into. The shifting that I was hearing, that's kind of what I want. That's what I listen for. But it's, you know, that can be controlled with the bow. Oh, the volume's shifting as you move closer to the mic and back again. I mean, that obviously, that would make sense because my voice is getting closer and probably the cello is getting closer at certain points too. And also, yeah, let me just say in terms of this, you know, it's hard. I can't hear exactly what's happening right now. There could be a thing where maybe when I'm at my top volume, it's slightly clipping, and so it's, do you know what I mean? So it almost sounds like quieter because it goes beyond what the mic's capability is. I'll look into that for next time. That's a good point. Okay. While making, okay, let's see. I'm going to scroll just a little bit to see how much pressure you apply to the string as you slide. That's kind of what I talked about. So with shift, I'm guessing we're talking about the shifting. With shifting, what on the left hand, let me just talk about that for a second. I want to be like a harmonic weight during the shift. Unless if I was doing some kind of musical gesture where I wanted to hear like a, well, let's try that again. Something like that, where I want to hear a big slide, then I would keep my finger down through the slide, and where I come in with the bow, that's, you know, that's when you hear, that's what you're hearing is the finger is almost like playing the note throughout. But with shifting, for like smooth, seamless shifting, I want to be almost like a harmonic. So I kind of, for shifting, I personally kind of, I'll tend to like hook my finger on the side of the string so that I don't take contact off of the string, but I'm not holding the finger down to the fingerboard. And I used to do a shift kind of back in the day where it was kind of like grinding, kind of almost like I could get there, but it was like very into the string. Now it's kind of, you're like, and you can prepare with the elbows, the other thing with the shift, boom. So it's almost like throwing a ball. So something like that. The left hand's very light. And for the bow, it's the same thing. It's however audible or inaudible you want it to be is how much bow speed and weight you're going to use during the shift. If you want it to be very, very clean, the bow is basically almost stopping. If you want a little more slide, then the bow is moving just a little bit more. Because again, you're in a shift. It's helpful to remember. This sounds obvious, but it can be confusing at times. It's helpful to remember that the bow is what's making the sound. So if you want less sound, you have to do something less with the bow. Do you see what I mean? And if you want more sound, you would do more with the bow. So it's the left hand, you want comfort and you want a light touch because it aids for like a seamless flow, and it helps the shifting be ergonomically good, but then also it helps it not like engage the right arm to, kind of like squeeze and everything. So this is seamless, but the bow is the thing that's going to make it audible or not. Okay, let's see here. Even though I play a level, okay, especially the D string. Okay, we got that. Could you help explain again how to adjust the weight of bowing if it's not pushing more or less? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. So I think what we're talking about is like at the different lanes, how to sink in weight without pushing, which is its own kind of thing. So part of my like sinking in weight and how to do that organically is going to be in that Facebook challenge next week. But I think if you think about petting an animal, that can really help in the sense of what your arm needs to do. So if you pet an animal, you don't push down, pet, push down, pet. Do you know what I mean? It's not pushing down and then moving your arm across. You're coming in kind of a like it comes almost like at an angle, and it's almost like, if you really want to get nerdy on this, if you think of like a dog with extra skin, not a Shar-Pei, but just something that's like a Mastiff or something like that with flexible skin, you could get it to where you're almost like catching the skin, and there's like a little lump of skin on this side that you push, and do you know what I mean? Or like almost like a loose rug or something. And by sinking weight in correctly, you can kind of like get a nice gentle sinking in with the arm without thinking downwards, like instead of that, it's yeah. Now, how to catch the string, that's where I think the first finger is involved, and also thinking of the hair. I think it helped me to think of the hair almost again like a scalpel or like a blade. And so the job of the first finger is to engage the string and make sure that blade is ready to slice. So whether you use hair at an angle like I do, or some people use flat hair, you're still with the fourth finger, you're kind of making sure that the weight of the arm we just talked about is going to catch and slice the string. So up here, I think actually plain light can be difficult in its own way too, because you don't want to just take weight out of the arm and then skate across the top. It's not like you just do like a puppet, like that feeling. It's, again, the first finger is like you're pushing on the sharp part of a blade and slicing, and then however weightless your arm is, or however light you're petting is. There's a small dog. Just to change this analogy for the different lanes, here's medium, and then maybe, and yeah, there's a little bit also of a feeling, even though you're going this way on a down bow, there's a feeling also of like, if you imagine like a ball of taffy and you overcome that inertia and then you're like stretching the taffy, there's that kind of a feeling too, where you're tugging on the string but you're slicing with the first finger, and that helps you get down towards the bridge and it slice through the string and get a good sound without. I used to kind of just press, and you can on some. This cello doesn't like that much. My old nice cello, doesn't mind as much if you just kind of press the sound out down there. This one doesn't like it as much, so it really forced me to remember to slice the string and then sort of like tug. You could also maybe take the bow like this, and you're just kind of like doing this kind of an action, like scooping in so that here's the button is towards the camera. When I start, the button's facing like behind me this way, and I'm just gonna, sorry, let me start on the A string. So the button's facing over here, and by the end, it's made like a U shape, like a sickle shape, and it's come around. That can help show you how to catch the edge without using, I mean, I'm very, very light. I'm just efficiently catching the edge. And that's actually something I'll cover a little bit more depth in the Facebook challenge as well. Really good question, though. And that is a difficult thing. Okay, let me just see. Oh, it's been super helpful. I'm so glad to hear that. So I use a mirror now. I always tend to bend the bow hand, so I use a mirror now. Oh, good. Yeah. Mirror. I'm a big fan of the mirror. Seriously. What I would say though, can I give you just everyone out there a little bit of advice when it comes to using the mirror? Make the task simple enough that you can stare at the mirror. Okay? Because here's what it would look like when I first was doing the mirror. I would go like, and by the second full bar, if I'm playing just the piece I'm working on, I just go back to my old habit. I'm not looking at the mirror. I kind of checked in at first, and then now it's just I'm aware. I think I practiced with the mirror, but I barely did. Do you know what I mean? So I think with the mirror, the trick, almost like the trick of learning what it actually looks and feels like to pull a truly straight bow parallel to the bridge with the mirror, is like to make a task for yourself that's simple enough that you can truly engage with the mirror, and other things would therefore have to be a little more on autopilot, so that you can really analyze what's going on in the mirror. Which is why with today's modern technology, sometimes a nice way to do it also is to do cell phone recording or camera recording on your laptop or something. Set yourself up so that it's a real good angle for what you're looking at, what you want to be investigating. My advice there is to do a very short clip, because what I found is if I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do a practice session. I'm gonna do it with the camera because I really want to learn what I'm doing here, and I would turn the camera on and do like a practice session, turn the camera off, and never go back, because it's like, what am I going to sift through like 45 minutes of practice? And what I found much more helpful is, here's my question on this string crossing, this shift, whatever, is my bow doing something funky or is it good? Let me do just the shift, 5 to 6 second little clip. Okay, check it, go back, check it, try to problem solve it that way. It's just from my personal experience, if you just keep the camera running or you just do even like a 1 or 2 minute clip, unless you're a very particular type of person, which I'm not, it's unlikely I'm going to go back and sift through that footage. I'll just say like, oh yeah, I had the camera on, which made me feel like a little more pressure possibly, but I didn't actually engage with it to solve the problem like I intended. Okay, let me go back to the start because there was just time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Okay, Angelina, hello from Argentina. Hello. I had a question about ways one could practice when traveling, even if they obviously aren't the most effective. Well, okay, so when you're traveling, I've done this. It depends how far you are in your cello journey. But one thing, as I got more and more kind of experienced and more, what that means partly is that I'm a better player, but it also means that I have habitual use that I can like cue into. I did a lot of, I would do mental practice, which means like, I'm on, let's say I had no buttons on because they were vibrating. It's not like I'm missing buttons. So let's say you're on the train or whatever, and you want to practice like this, passage in the Brahms sonata, or you want to pass, this etude you're working on. If you can sit there, close your eyes, you get to a point with your playing habits where you can actually visualize your arms doing the motions, if that makes sense. So in my mind, like I'm practicing this shift, bum, 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 ba, bum, ba, da, bum, ba, da, 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 ba, ba, whatever it is. And I'm practicing it over and over. And I can actually, at this point, it takes a lot of energy in it. Some people I think they kind of get into, like, for example, my wife gets into this. She'll just be like, if she has a gig coming up or a concert coming up, she'll be watching TV and I just see her fingers and she's just passively running through the piece because she started, I think partly because she started when she was 3 years old. And so it just became part of like a neural network. I'm not automatic like that. If I'm going to mental practice, I need to sit down and like, okay, let's start mental practicing. It's not just going to happen on its own. But at this point, I can feel the bow. I can feel the like tug of the string. And then I think that kind of practice session can be invaluable because instead of just having a habit and just kind of playing whatever feels comfortable, when I do mental practice, it's unlimited what you can shape in your mind. Okay, so you can start hearing like real nuanced phrasing that you wouldn't necessarily come to from just regular practice if you're not checking in constantly to make sure that your ideal version of this is getting closer to that ideal version. You can also just get like, okay, I can comfortably play these notes without bad things happening. But that doesn't mean you're shaping the music the way you want. And I think mental practice can be amazing for that kind of like figuring out musicality and then also problem solving. When I first learned about mental practice a lot, it was during when I went back to school for cello. I got a second bachelor's, and even in lessons, I would do like a mental rep with my teacher. And sometimes it was so funny. I would say like I'd have like a difficult shift for me, and I would try the mental rep in the classroom, and I would open my eyes and be like, I missed the shift. So my mind, even in a mental rep, it wasn't clear exactly where the note was that I was going to, or the shift wasn't clear. And I could even tell without even trying it with my actual cello that I missed the shift. So if you're missing the shift in your mind mentally, what is the chance you're going to hit it when you add the difficult thing of actually accomplishing it on the cello? So what's great for mental practice, the more crystal clear you can make the task at hand, both how it looks, how it feels. I visualize it from my point of view. Usually I don't. Some people, I think, visualize it almost like they're watching themselves play. Everyone's different with mental practice. This is another thing I'm fascinated by. But the more you can clarify things mentally, like while you're traveling, if you have that capability, then when you go to sit down, sometimes you've actually unlocked new levels of your playing because it's like, oh, this is comfortable physically, but it's not the shape I want, because it's not. And now I've mentally practiced it, and it's not what I'm doing. I'm not missing the notes, but it's like not even close to what I'm want to hear. And now that's clear to me because I did so much mental practice. So that's what I would do when traveling. Will this video be available afterwards? Absolutely, it'll be on my YouTube. page. Okay. I think we're going to have to stop there because I also have some teaching to do today. But thank you, everyone, so much for. Oh, Angelina, good. You're still with me and you heard that. Great. Okay, great. So thank you so much for tuning in. And please, if you want, join me next week. It's July 11, 12, 13th on Facebook. If you're going to, some people email me. Currently, it's only available on Facebook. So if you don't do Facebook, I totally understand. And we're trying to think of ways that we'll, come up with solutions in the future, hopefully that don't use Facebook, because I know there's a lot of people who aren't a huge fan of it. But join me. It's really fun. It's hundreds of other adult learners. It's a really encouraging, productive group every time, and we'll be unlocking some really, really great things in your bow arm. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.